The monitor's steady beep turned erratic at 11:47 p.m. Marcus Chun stood frozen in the hospital corridor, watching 18 specialists in $1,000 suits shake their heads in defeat. Through the glass partition, his 16-year-old son lay dying on blood-soaked sheets, pale, motionless, slipping away despite everything money could buy. 18 specialists, 18 failures. 2 hours left. The CEO of Tech Corp Industries had built an empire moving billions across global markets. He owned penthouse suites with million-dollar views, commanded private jets, kept the world's best doctors on speed dial. None of it mattered now. His son's blood wouldn't clot, and medical science had no answers. What Marcus didn't see, not yet, was a young woman trembling in the corner. Emma Rodriguez, still wearing her stained catering uniform from the charity gala, where this nightmare began 3 hours ago. Her fingers clutched something in her pocket, a worn leather pouch that would shatter everything Marcus believed about power, privilege, and who holds the real answers when expertise fails. Before you find out what saved Ethan's life, hit that subscribe button and tell me in the comments. Would you trust a stranger with your child's life? Also tell us where you are watching this video from. I want to know how far this video goes. Crystal chandeliers cast golden light across the St. Regency Hotel's Grand Ballroom. 200 guests in designer gowns and tailored tuxedos mingled beneath vaulted ceilings. Champagne flutes catching the light like liquid diamonds. At $2,000 per plate, this charity gala attracted the kind of wealth that moved markets and shaped policy. Marcus Chun worked the room with practiced ease, shaking hands with board members who control billions. Q4 projections look strong, someone said. Marcus smiled, nodded, already calculating his response. When to be confident, when to be cautious. Beside him, 16-year-old Ethan shifted uncomfortably in his Armani suit. The jacket fit perfectly, tailored to the millimeter, but Ethan tugged at the collar anyway. He made polite conversation with a tech investor's wife about college plans. His answers rehearsed and hollow. Princeton, maybe Stanford. Pre-law or business. The expected path for a Chun. At the room's edge, Emma Rodriguez moved through the crowd invisible as air. She refilled champagne glasses, cleared empty plates, smiled politely when guests looked through her rather than at her. The catering uniform marked her as part of the scenery, present but not seen. She watched the luxury with quiet observation, noting the easy way these people occupied space, as if the world owed them room. Marcus was mid-sentence about market volatility when Ethan's hand gripped his arm. Hard. Dad. Ethan's voice came out tight. I don't feel right. Marcus turned, CEO, mask slipping. What's wrong? I don't know, Ethan's face had gone pale, a sheen of sweat on his forehead despite the air conditioning. Then Marcus saw it, a dark stain spreading across Ethan's white dress shirt. Small at first, just below the ribs, then growing, spreading outward like crimson ink on paper. The white fabric surrendering to red. Ethan. Marcus's voice cracked. The blood came faster, seeping through expensive fabric, dripping onto marble floors worth more per square foot than most people earned in a month. Someone screamed. A champagne flute slipped from manicured fingers, shattering into 1,000 crystal pieces that scattered across white marble like stars exploding. Ethan swayed. Marcus caught him, felt his son's weight become dead weight, felt the blood, warm and impossible, soaking through his own tuxedo jacket. Call an ambulance. Now, the ballroom erupted into controlled chaos. Guests backing away, forming a circle. Someone shouting medical commands. A woman crying. Security rushing forward with a first aid kit that would mean nothing against whatever was happening. Marcus sank to the floor with his son in his arms. The CEO dissolving into just a father watching his child bleed for reasons no one could explain. Around them, the gala continued its momentum. Music still playing. Chandeliers still glittering. Champagne still flowing. But Marcus's world had already ended. The ambulance screamed through downtown traffic, sirens wailing against glass towers. Paramedics worked over Ethan's body, their movements efficient but increasingly frantic. Compression bandages soaked through in seconds. For lines established, fluids pumping. Nothing stopped the bleeding. 7 minutes to St. Catherine's Medical Center. 7 minutes that felt like drowning. The ER intake exploded into coordinated chaos. Nurses swarmed, scissors cutting away Ethan's blood-soaked shirt. Doctors barking orders. Someone shouting blood type. Another calling for the trauma surgeon. Ethan barely conscious now, eyes unfocused, skin the color of paper. Marcus stood outside the glass partition. Fists clenched so tight his nails drew blood from his own palms. They'd made him wait here. Made him watch through glass like a visitor at an aquarium, observing something he couldn't reach or save. The specialists arrived in waves. Specialists hashtag 1-3 administered standard coagulants, medications that should trigger clotting within minutes. They watched monitors, waited. Nothing changed. Blood still seeping from incision sites, from needle marks, from everywhere the body had been pierced. Specialists hashtag 4-7 attempted transfusions. 6 different donors, 6 different blood types tested for compatibility. They pumped fresh blood into Ethan's veins, watched his body reject it or simply let it leak out as fast as it entered. Dr. Morrison, of hematology, stood with her arms crossed, frowning at results that made no medical sense. Marcus pulled out his phone, hand shaking. He called in every favor accumulated over 20 years of empire building. I don't care what it costs. Fly in anyone Boston, Johns Hopkins, Mayo Clinic. Get them here. His voice cracked on the last word. Specialists hashtag 8-12 tried experimental protocols, pulled from research trials, not yet approved for general use. Synthetic clotting factors, platelet stimulators, immune suppressants to stop whatever war Ethan's body was waging against itself. Each attempt made things worse. The bleeding intensified, spreading to new sites. Ethan's blood pressure dropping despite everything they pumped into him. Through the glass, Marcus watched his son disappear beneath a crowd of expensive expertise. Watched monitors display numbers he didn't understand, but recognized as bad from the doctors' faces. Watched the clock tick forward. 9 p.m., 10 p.m., 11 p.m. His empire could move markets, could make governments negotiate, could build towers that scraped clouds and networks that spanned continents. But it couldn't save his only son. Specialists hashtag 13-18 gathered for final consultation. Last resort. Experimental stem cell therapy. A Hail Mary attempt to reboot Ethan's entire blood production system. They injected the treatment directly into his bone marrow, waited for the miracle that didn't come. At 11:34 p.m., Dr. Morrison emerged from the trauma bay. She pulled down her surgical mask, and Marcus saw defeat in her eyes before she spoke. Mr. Chin. Her voice stayed professionally steady despite the tremor in her hands. Your son has a bleeding disorder we've never encountered. His platelets are attacking his own clotting factors. It's like his body is at war with itself. We've administered every known coagulant, tried transfusions from 6 different donors, even attempted experimental stem cell therapy. She paused. Marcus's world tilted. Nothing's working. Dr. Morrison's clinical mask cracked, just slightly. I'm so sorry. He has maybe 2 hours left, possibly less. The words hit Marcus like bullets. 2 hours. His son had 2 hours left, and 18 specialists in the country's best hospital could do nothing but watch him bleed to death. Marcus slumped against the hospital corridor wall, his $1,000 suit rumpled and blood-stained. Around him, the hospital hummed with fluorescent efficiency, machines beeping, nurses passing, the intercom calling codes he didn't understand. But he heard none of it. All he heard was the question burning through his mind. Should I have told him? 16 years ago, Lynn had died in a delivery room 3 floors below this one. Complications from a rare genetic condition the doctors couldn't explain fast enough to fix. She'd bled out holding their newborn son, whispering words Marcus could barely hear over the medical alarms. "Promise me you'll keep him safe." He'd promised, and he'd failed. The family doctor had suggested comprehensive genetic screening when Ethan turned 5. "Given your wife's history, we should map any inherited factors," Dr. Reeves had said, holding a requisition form that Marcus never signed. He'd refused, made excuses about Ethan's normal childhood, about not wanting to treat his son like a medical specimen, about moving forward instead of dwelling in past tragedy. But the truth Marcus admitted only now, with his son dying floors above, was simpler and more cowardly. He'd been terrified of reliving Lynn's death through their son, terrified of finding out Ethan carried the same genetic time bomb, terrified that knowledge would mean watching his son the way bomb squads watch ticking devices, waiting for explosion. So he'd buried the truth under wealth and denial and the comfortable certainty that money could solve any problem when it arrived. The guilt manifested as physical pain, crushing pressure in his chest, difficulty breathing, the sensation of drowning on dry land. He'd built an empire on decisive action, on seeing problems before competitors did, on never hesitating when choices mattered. Yet when it came to his son's health, he'd been a coward. Tears carved paths down his face for the first time since Lynn's funeral. The CEO mask dissolved completely, leaving just a man who'd prioritized comfort over caution, who'd chosen ignorance over information because knowing felt harder than not knowing. Did I prioritize his normal childhood over his safety? The question had an answer he couldn't bear to speak aloud. Money meant nothing now. Power meant nothing. He'd trade his entire empire, every dollar, every asset, every carefully constructed piece of his business legacy, for 5 more minutes with his conscious son. 5 minutes to say the words he'd been too emotionally distant to speak clearly. "I love you. I'm sorry. I should have protected you better." Marcus pressed his forehead against the cold hospital wall, shoulders shaking with silent sobs. That's when he noticed her, the young woman hovering at the crisis's edge, clutching a silver tray against her chest like a shield. She wore the uniform of St. Regency's catering staff, white button-down shirt, black vest, black slacks. Her name tag read Emma Rodriguez in small printed letters. She stood at the corridor's edge, just beyond the chaos of medical personnel rushing in and out of Ethan's room, clutching a silver serving tray against her chest like a shield. Marcus noticed her the way a drowning man notices debris floating past, something out of place in the disaster. His grief transformed instantly into rage, a target, someone to direct the helplessness toward. "What are you doing here?" His voice came out sharp as broken glass. "This is a restricted area. Security." Emma flinched, but didn't retreat. Her dark eyes were wide, her hands trembling against the tray. She opened her mouth, closed it, tried again. "Mr. Chen, her voice caught. "I might know what's wrong with your son." The absurdity of the statement hung in the air like smoke. A waitress, a nobody in a catering uniform, still smelling faintly of champagne and hors d'oeuvres, claiming knowledge that 18 specialists couldn't access. Dr. Morrison emerged from Ethan's room at that moment, pulling off bloodied gloves. She stepped forward, professional courtesy barely masking irritation. "Miss, this isn't appropriate. We have the world's leading specialists." 18 specialists who can't stop the bleeding," Emma interrupted, her voice gaining strength despite her trembling hands. "Because you're treating the wrong condition." Marcus felt rage boiling up from somewhere deep and primal. How dare this waitress, this nobody, presume to understand what trained doctors with decades of experience couldn't? His fists clenched, his jaw tightened. He took a step forward, ready to unleash fury that had nowhere else to go. But something in Emma's expression stopped him cold. She wasn't being arrogant, wasn't seeking attention or playing hero. She looked terrified, like someone stepping off a cliff with no guarantee of solid ground. Her terror was familiar. Marcus saw it in the mirror every morning when Lynn was dying, when he'd known something was desperately wrong, but had no power to fix it. Emma's words came faster now, tumbling over each other. My mother had the same thing. The bleeding, the failed treatments, everything. She died when I was 12 because we couldn't afford the specialists, couldn't afford the hospitals that might have. Her voice cracked. She swallowed hard, steadied herself. But before she died, she told me about an old family remedy, something passed down from our great-grandmother, who was a healer in Mexico. I know it sounds crazy, but it sounds like superstitious nonsense, Dr. Morrison cut in, her tone professional but firm. Mr. Chin, I cannot allow some folk remedy to be administered to your son. The liability alone. But Marcus raised his hand, silencing her. His business instincts, the same instincts that had built an empire by recognizing patterns others missed, fired through the grief. You're treating the wrong condition. That phrase hit different. Not, you're doing it wrong, or try this instead. She was saying the entire foundation of their approach was flawed. The 18 specialists had been solving the wrong problem. In Emma's desperation, Marcus recognized his own. She'd lost her mother to this mystery disease. She understood his terror in a way these clinical professionals, with their steady voices and careful liability calculations, never could. And she'd said the one thing that made him pause. I watched my mother die from this. I couldn't watch it happen again. She wasn't here for attention. She was here because she couldn't live with standing silent while history repeated. Marcus's voice came out quieter than he intended, stripped of the CEO authority that usually commanded rooms. What do you have? Emma's hand moved toward her pocket, then hesitated. Her fingers hovered there, trembling. She glanced at Dr. Morrison, then back to Marcus, and something shifted in her expression, from fear to resolve. Before I show you, she whispered, you need to understand something. Marcus felt the floor tilt slightly. The hospital corridor seemed to narrow, sounds becoming muffled and distant. Understand what? Your son's condition, it's not random. Emma's voice dropped lower, forcing Marcus to lean in. Someone needs to tell you about Lin Chen's family history. The real history, not what's in the medical files. The name hit Marcus like a physical blow. Time stopped. How do you know my wife's name? Emma's eyes filled with tears she didn't let fall. Because my mother knew her. They were cousins. Distant cousins, but family. The revelation crashed over Marcus like ice water. Lynn had family she'd never mentioned? In 16 years together, courtship, marriage, pregnancy, she'd never spoken of cousins of extended family beyond her adoptive parents who died before Marcus met her. That's impossible. Lynn was adopted. She had no blood relatives. That's what they wanted you to believe, Emma said. Your wife's genetic condition. It wasn't rare at all in our family line. It was common. And there was a reason for it, Mr. Chin. A reason someone deliberately hid from you. Dr. Morrison stepped closer, her medical skepticism warring with professional curiosity. What do you mean common in the family line? Emma pulled out her phone with shaking hands, opened a document. The condition looks like a bleeding disorder, but it's actually an immune response triggered by a specific compound. She held up the screen, showing a scanned handwritten document in Spanish, faded with age. My great-grandmother documented it. The symptoms appear like hemophilia or platelet dysfunction. But that's not what's happening. It's like an allergy that attacks from the inside, but only when exposed to the trigger. Marcus's mind raced through implications, each more disturbing than the last. What trigger? An industrial toxin. Specifically, a compound used in manufacturing processes. Emma's voice steadied as she moved into technical explanation, the terror replaced by the certainty of knowledge passed down through generations. When someone with specific genetic markers common in the Rodriguez bloodline, is exposed to this toxin, their immune system treats their own clotting factors as invaders. That's why standard coagulants don't work. You're not treating a deficiency or a dysfunction. You're treating an immune system at war with itself. Dr. Morrison's frown deepened, but Marcus saw the shift in her body language. She was listening now, not dismissing. Why would specialists miss something like that? Because they're treating the symptoms, not the cause, Emma said. They see bleeding that won't stop, so they try to force clotting. But forcing clotting when the immune system is actively attacking clotting factors just makes the immune response stronger. It's like throwing gasoline on a fire. Marcus felt reality reorganizing itself around him. Lynn had family she never mentioned, a genetic condition that ran in bloodlines, a deliberate conspiracy to hide information. Why was this hidden, he demanded. If Lynn's family knew about this genetic vulnerability, why wouldn't they warn her? Warn me? Emma's expression darkened. Because the Chun family and the Rodriguez family have history, Mr. Chun. Complicated, dangerous history that goes back 3 generations. And I think, she paused, seemed to gather courage. I think someone in your organization knows about that history, knows about the genetic vulnerability. And I think they used it. Used it? Marcus's voice rose. What do you? Why is Ethan sick now? Emma challenged. Why tonight? At a gala surrounded by hundreds of people. Why this specific symptom pattern that mimics a disorder but isn't one? The questions hung heavy. Marcus thought about the gala, about Ethan drinking champagne before the collapse, about who benefits from this secret? Emma whispered. Who gains if the Chun bloodline ends with Ethan? Who has access to your family's medical records, your company's resources, your trust? Before Marcus could answer, an alarm shrieked from Ethan's room. High-pitched, urgent, the sound of machines detecting catastrophe. A nurse rushed past them, shouting over her shoulder. He's crashing. We're losing him. Marcus lunged toward the door, every instinct screaming to reach his son. Emma's hand shot out, gripping his arm with surprising strength for someone so slight. Wait. Let go of me. Marcus tried to shake her off, but Emma held firm. Mr. Chen, listen. Her voice cut through his panic. If you let them continue with conventional treatment, he'll die. I've seen it happen. I watched it kill my mother. Through the doorway, Marcus saw organized chaos. Doctors surrounding Ethan's bed, someone calling for the crash cart, monitors screaming their warnings. His son's body jerking under their hands, blood pressure plummeting on the display. Charging to 200, someone shouted. Clear. Emma pulled something from her pocket. A small leather pouch, worn smooth with age, the stitching frayed but holding. She pressed it into Marcus's hands. It weighed almost nothing. This thing that supposedly held answers 18 specialists couldn't find. This is what saved my grandmother when she had the same crisis, Emma said urgently. But Mr. Chin, her voice dropped to barely a whisper, forcing him to focus despite the alarms. Despite every cell in his body screaming to rush to his dying son. If I'm right about what's really wrong with Ethan, then someone close to you deliberately caused this. And they're probably in this hospital right now, making sure he doesn't survive. The words landed like bullets. Deliberately caused this. Not an accident. Not bad genetic luck. Murder. Dr. Morrison appeared at Marcus's shoulder, her surgical mask pulled down, her face grave. Mr. Chun, decide now. Her voice carried the weight of finality. We can attempt one final emergency procedure, a direct cardiac intervention to stabilize him long enough for whatever time he has left. His chances are less than 5%. She glanced at Emma, and Marcus saw the disdain flicker across her professional mask. Or you can listen to superstition and watch your son die. Marcus stood paralyzed between 2 worlds. Behind him through the doorway, his son was dying despite the best medical technology billions of dollars could access. Before him, a waitress held a leather pouch containing what herbs? Folk remedies? Generations-old superstition? Everything Marcus had built was founded on data, logic, expertise. He'd made his fortune by trusting numbers, by believing in credentialed knowledge, by following proven systems. But expertise had failed. Every specialist, every protocol, every evidence-based intervention had made things worse. Logic had no answer. The logical choice was to let Dr. Morrison try her 5% intervention, to trust the medical establishment one more time, even though it had failed 18 times already. And the data. The data said his son had minutes left regardless of what choice he made. Marcus looked at Emma's face, saw the same desperation he felt reflected there. She'd lost her mother to this. She understood the specific terror of watching someone bleed to death while experts stood helpless. In her eyes, he recognized his own helplessness, his own willingness to grasp at anything, proven or not, if it meant one more chance. "What's in that pouch?" His voice came out hoarse. Emma met his eyes, and he saw layers of meaning in her expression. Fear and hope and grief and determination all tangled together. "Truth," she said. "Medicine. And proof that your wife didn't die by accident, Mr. Chin." The words hit like hammer blows. Lynn, bleeding out in a delivery room despite the best obstetric team money could buy. He'd always believed it was tragic bad luck, a rare genetic complication no one could have predicted or prevented. But what if it wasn't? "Neither is your son," Emma continued, her voice steady now despite her trembling hands. "But if I show you, if you use this, you'll have to face the answer to a question you've never asked. Who benefits from the Chin family line ending with Ethan?" Behind them, the monitors' screaming intensified. Someone shouted for the crash cart. A nurse called out blood pressure numbers that meant nothing to Marcus, but clearly meant everything to the medical team. "Mr. Chin," Dr. Morrison pressed, "we're out of time." Marcus looked at the leather pouch in his hands, felt its insignificant weight. This tiny thing against the full force of modern medicine. A waitress's family recipe against 18 specialists' combined expertise. But those specialists had failed. Modern medicine had reached its limit and found Ethan beyond it. He thought about Lynn in that delivery room, about promises made to the dying, about risks and certainty and the difference between the two. If he did nothing, if he let Dr. Morrison try her 5% procedure, and Ethan died anyway, at least he could say he'd trusted the experts, could say he'd made the logical choice. But if Emma was right, and someone had poisoned his son deliberately, then the experts were treating the wrong problem. And logic was just another name for repeating the same failures. Marcus's hand closed around the pouch. His other hand reached for Emma's shoulder. "Show me," he said. The monitors screamed louder. The crash cart rattled down the hallway. And Marcus Chin, master of data-driven decisions, chose to believe in the impossible. Emma's fingers trembled as she opened the leather pouch. The stitching gave way reluctantly, as if the generations of use had fused the material together. She tipped the contents onto the silver serving tray she still carried. An absurd image, Marcus thought distantly. A folk remedy displayed on catering equipment. 3 items. Dried herbs bundled in faded cloth, a piece of paper folded small and yellowed with age, and a tiny vial of amber liquid that caught the fluorescent lights like captured sunlight. "This is yerba de sangre," Emma said, her voice steadying as she touched the herbs with something approaching reverence. "Blood herb. My great-grandmother used it to treat the family condition. The one doctors said didn't exist because they'd never seen it in textbooks." She unfolded the paper carefully. Handwritten notes in Spanish. The ink faded to brown, but still legible. Recipes, dosages, symptoms documented in careful script. Marcus stared. This is what you want to give my son? Dried plants, and what is that liquid? Concentrated extract, Emma said. Made from the same herb, preserved in alcohol. Together, they neutralize the toxin, triggering the immune response. This is insane. Marcus heard his own voice, distant and strange. This is a centuries-old folk remedy against modern medicine. Modern medicine is trying to stop bleeding, Emma countered, meeting his eyes. This neutralizes what's causing it. There's a difference, Mr. Chin. One treats symptoms. The other treats the disease. Dr. Morrison stepped forward, her professional authority reasserting itself. Mr. Chin, I will not allow an untested substance to be administered to your son. The liability is enormous. If this harms him, if it accelerates his death, you'll be legally responsible. I'll be professionally obligated to report this as medical negligence. Her voice rose. Security needs to remove this woman. This is a hospital, not a... I'll take full responsibility, Marcus said quietly. Dr. Morrison stopped mid-sentence. What? Full legal responsibility. Document everything. Record your objections. Make it clear you advised against this. Marcus felt something crystallize inside him. A decision made, consequences be damned. But do it quickly, because my son has minutes left, and your medicine already failed him. Security appeared at the corridor's end, summoned by Dr. Morrison's earlier call. Marcus waved them off with the gesture of a man accustomed to command. They hesitated, then retreated. Emma was already moving. She pulled a small bottle of water from her uniform pocket, one of the expensive brands from the gala. The irony wasn't lost on Marcus. Using a rich man's water to prepare a poor woman's medicine. She worked quickly, hand steady now that the decision was made. Crumbled the dried herbs into water. Added careful drops from the amber vial. The mixture turned the color of old copper. An earthy smell filling the sterile hospital corridor. It smelled like rain on desert soil, like something ancient and living in a place built for clinical death. It needs 3 minutes to steep, Emma said. Then I administer it through his foreport, direct to bloodstream. Dr. Morrison made a sound of protest but didn't move to stop them. Instead, she pulled out her phone, documenting everything. Covering herself legally, Marcus realized. Smart. The 3 minutes stretched like hours. Through the doorway, Marcus could see the medical team still working. Chest compressions now. Someone breathing for Ethan with a manual pump. His son's body moving under their hands like a puppet. Lifeless except for the motion they forced into it. Ready, Emma said. They moved to Ethan's room. A nurse blocked Emma's path. You can't be in here. She's with me, Marcus said with the CEO's command that brooked no argument. The nurse stepped aside, confusion and disapproval clear on her face. Emma approached Ethan's bed. Up close, Marcus's son looked impossibly young and impossibly pale, the blood on the sheets obscene contrast to his white skin. Emma found the foreport with practiced ease. She'd done this before, Marcus realized. For her mother, probably, in those final desperate hours. She injected the mixture slowly. The copper-colored liquid disappeared into plastic tubing, traveling toward his son's dying veins. Marcus found himself praying for the first time since Lynn's funeral. Not words exactly, just a desperate internal screaming at any deity that might be listening. Please, please. He's 16. He hasn't lived yet. Please. Emma stepped back, the empty syringe in her hand. Dr. Morrison watched the monitors with a frown that might have been concentration or might have been anticipation of saying, I told you so. They waited. Seconds crawled past. 30, 45, 60. The monitors continued their erratic screaming. Ethan's chest rose and fell only because someone was pumping the breath into him. 2 minutes. Marcus felt hope dying in his chest. He'd gambled his son's Last moments on superstition. On a waitress with a leather pouch. What had he? Wait. Dr. Morrison's voice cut through his spiraling thoughts. She stepped closer to the monitors, her frown deepening. His clotting factors, they're stabilizing? The question mark in her voice spoke volumes. Disbelief, confusion. The sound of a specialist watching the impossible. The change started small. A nurse noticed first. She was removing blood-soaked gauze from a surgical site, preparing to replace it with fresh compression bandages. When she paused, "Doctor?" Her voice carried uncertainty, the bleeding slowing. Dr. Morrison crossed to the bed in 2 strides. She examined the surgical site herself, not trusting second-hand observation. Her expression shifted through several emotions too quickly for Marcus to parse. "Continue monitoring," she ordered. But her voice had lost its certainty. Marcus watched numbers on screens change. He didn't understand the medical terminology, couldn't read the graphs, but he recognized the shift in the room's atmosphere. The frantic urgency softening into cautious observation. Another surgical site. Another nurse's quiet exclamation of surprise. The fresh bandages stayed white instead of immediately soaking through crimson. Color began returning to Ethan's lips, barely noticeable at first, then unmistakable. The gray pallor of near death warming toward something closer to living flesh. The heart monitor's erratic rhythm steadied. Not immediately, not dramatically, but gradually finding a pace that looked less like a seismograph during an earthquake and more like an actual heartbeat. "His platelet function is normalizing," Dr. Morrison said, her voice flat with shock. "I don't understand. The compound's active mechanisms shouldn't work this fast, shouldn't?" She stopped, staring at her tablet, displaying lab values that made no medical sense. Emma stood motionless in the corner, tears streaming down her face silently. Not tears of joy yet, too soon for that, but tears of recognition. She'd seen this before, in her grandmother probably. The moment when death's grip loosened. 5 minutes after administration, the medical team stopped chest compressions. Ethan was breathing on his own again. Shallow breaths, weak but autonomous. 8 minutes. Ethan's eyes fluttered open, unfocused at first, pupils dilating and contracting as they tried to make sense of fluorescent lights and concerned faces. "Ethan." Marcus moved to the bedside, gripping the rail so hard his knuckles went white. "Ethan, can you hear me?" His son's eyes found him. Recognition sparked. Ethan's mouth moved, forming a word that came out barely louder than breathing. "Dad." The single syllable broke something in Marcus. He rushed around the bed rail, gripped his son's hand, careful of the 4 lines, the sensors, all the medical equipment keeping track of this impossible recovery. Tears flowed freely down his face, no longer the tears of anticipated grief, but something infinitely more complex. "I'm here. I'm here. You're okay. You're going to be okay." A nurse removed the final blood-soaked gauze, applied fresh bandages. They stayed white, perfectly, impossibly white. Dr. Morrison stood frozen, tablet hanging forgotten in her hand. She looked from Ethan to Emma to the monitoring equipment and back again, as if trying to solve an equation where the numbers refused to add up correctly. "I need to understand what just happened," she said finally, the words coming out slowly. Professional curiosity was overtaking professional skepticism, Marcus recognized. The shift from defender of protocols to scientist confronting anomaly. That mixture, what exactly is in it? What's the mechanism of action? How does it? Emma wiped her face with her sleeve, trying to compose herself. "I can tell you what my great-grandmother wrote. The chemical compounds she identified, the preparation methods, the dosage calculations. But I don't have the language you're looking for. I don't have the medical terminology or the molecular biology or—" "Then we'll figure out the language together," Dr. Morrison interrupted. She looked at Marcus. Your son is stable. Against everything I thought I knew, against all medical probability, he's stable. But Mr. Chin, her expression grew serious. We need to understand why. If this compound truly counteracts a specific toxin, if it works the way this young woman claims, then this isn't just about your son. This is about everyone else who might carry this genetic vulnerability. Emma moved toward the door, trying to slip away now that the crisis had passed. Marcus saw her. The way she tried to make herself invisible again, to return to being just a waitress who'd briefly intruded on wealthy people's tragedy. "Wait," he called. Emma turned, still trembling despite the victory. Her eyes met his, waiting for dismissal, for thanks and payment, and then exclusion from whatever came next. "How did you know?" Marcus asked quietly. "How were you so certain?" If you're as shocked as Marcus was right now, hit that like button and subscribe, because this story is about to reveal a conspiracy that goes back 3 generations. You don't want to miss what happens next. Emma sank into a plastic chair in the corridor, exhaustion finally catching up with adrenaline. Dr. Morrison and Marcus followed, giving the medical team space to continue monitoring Ethan's remarkable stabilization. "My great-grandmother was a first," Emma began, pulling out her phone with shaking hands. "The first in our family to document the symptoms, to find treatment, to write everything down so it wouldn't be lost." She opened a cloud folder, showed them scanned images of the paper from the pouch, now safely tucked away but preserved digitally. Pages and pages of handwritten Spanish, careful drawings of plants, symptom progressions documented with the precision of someone who understood observation even without formal training. She wrote that the bleeding wasn't random, that it appeared in family members only after certain events, working in specific factories, living near certain industrial sites, drinking from certain water sources. Emma scrolled through the images. She tested the water, tested the soil, tested everything she could with the resources she had. And she found it an industrial compound used in manufacturing, something that binds to specific genetic markers. Dr. Morrison leaned in, reading over Emma's shoulder. Her frown was concentration now, not dismissal. "This is remarkable documentation. The correlation she drew, the environmental factors she isolated. This is epidemiological work decades before those methods were standardized. It was introduced to our family bloodline deliberately 3 generations ago," Emma continued. She pulled up another folder. Family trees, marriage records, business documents. The Rodriguez family and the Chin family were business partners. Import-export trade between Mexico and the United States, 1960s. My family handled the Mexico operations. Your family handled U.S. distribution. Marcus felt cold spreading through his chest. "My father's generation." "Your grandfather's," Emma corrected gently. She showed him a faded photograph. 2 families standing together in front of a warehouse, men in suits, women in dresses. The fashions unmistakably 1960s. "This is from 1963. Rodriguez and Chin partners for 7 years. What happened?" "Dispute over company control. Money disappeared from shared accounts. Each family blamed the other. The partnership dissolved, turned hostile." Emma's voice grew quieter. "My great-grandmother's notes say the Chin patriarch poisoned the Rodriguez family's water supply. Used an industrial compound his factories produced, something he knew would cause harm, but wouldn't be easily traced." She pulled up chemical formulas, technical documents. Marcus recognized some of it. Compounds his grandfather's manufacturing plants had produced for industrial clients. Toxic, but legal. Dangerous only with direct, prolonged exposure. Or with genetic vulnerabilities that made even trace amounts catastrophic. "The compound binds to genetic markers common in the Rodriguez bloodline," Emma explained. "Passed down through generations, creating a dormant condition, usually harmless unless reactivated by secondary exposure or high stress." "Lynn," Marcus whispered, understanding crystallizing into horror. When she died, she probably never knew she had Rodriguez blood, Emma said softly. The family name was erased when she was adopted, the connection deliberately hidden, but the genetic markers remained. And when she was pregnant, when her body was under stress, the condition activated. Dr. Morrison finished, her medical mind filling in the pathology. Pregnancy is an enormous biological stressor. If she carried these markers, if there was any residual compound in her system, Marcus thought he might vomit. Lynn's death wasn't tragedy, wasn't bad luck. It was murder, generations delayed, a poisoning so sophisticated it looked like natural causes. Why didn't you tell me, he demanded. If your family knew about this, if you knew Lynn was related? I didn't know Lynn was related until after she died, Emma said. My mother saw the obituary, saw her maiden name, recognized it. By then it was too late. And what could we say? That your wife died from poison administered 60 years ago? That the Chen family had murdered the Rodriguez family slowly? Through their children's blood? Her voice broke. We had no proof, no money for lawyers, no credibility against a billionaire family. She wiped her eyes roughly. So, my mother told me the stories, made me memorize the remedy, made me promise to keep the knowledge alive in case anyone else. She couldn't finish. Ethan's exposure wasn't accidental, Emma said after a moment, her voice steadier. The timing, the location, the specific symptom pattern. Someone knew about the genetic vulnerability and weaponized it. Marcus wanted to deny it, wanted to believe his son's illness was random tragedy, not calculated murder. But his business instincts, the same instincts that had built an empire by recognizing patterns, screamed truth. Show me, he said. Emma pulled up security footage on her phone. I recorded this at the gala before Ethan collapsed. I was serving in his section. The video showed the ballroom from Emma's perspective, shaky but clear enough. Ethan standing with Marcus, both holding champagne flutes. They turned to greet someone, a board member probably. And for 30 seconds, both set their glasses on a high-top table. A man in an expensive suit approached from aside. Smooth, casual, not drawing attention. He pulled a small vial from his pocket, tipped it into Ethan's glass with practiced ease, then walked away. The entire action took maybe 5 seconds. Marcus recognized the man immediately. The suit, the confident walk, the profile when he turned slightly toward the camera. Richard Thornton, his CFO, his most trusted advisor for 15 years. His son's attempted murderer. Marcus moved fast. The CEO, who'd been paralyzed with grief minutes ago, snapped back into the man who commanded boardrooms and crushed competitors. He pulled out his phone, dialed his head of security. Lockdown, St. Catherine's Medical Center. No one in or out without my authorization. Full security sweep of the building. I want Richard Thornton located and detained. Dr. Morrison was already coordinating with hospital security, her medical authority translating smoothly into crisis management. Move Ethan Chun to ICU floor 3, the secure wing. I want guards on his room. No visitors without my explicit approval. Within minutes, the hospital transformed. Security personnel appeared at every entrance. Marcus's private security team, 6 former military contractors, who usually provided discreet protection, took positions throughout Ethan's floor. Ethan, now stable but weak, was moved to a private ICU room with reinforced doors and no windows. Marcus stayed at his son's bedside, physically positioned between his child and any threat that might materialize. Emma hovered uncertainly at the room's threshold. Mr. Chun, I should go. If Richard knows You're staying here, Marcus said firmly. Under protection. He poisoned my son. You think he'll hesitate to silence the woman who saved him? 20 minutes after the lockdown order, Marcus's head of security called back. We found him. He's on the original floor where your son was being treated. Claims he came to check on the boy, brought flowers and a sympathy card. Marcus felt rage, so pure it almost felt calm. Bring him to the security office. Set up a video call. The video connection established moments later. Marcus saw Richard on screen, his CFO of 15 years, his closest business confidant, the man he trusted with his company's financial future. Richard sat in a small security office, looking concerned and slightly confused, flowers in a vase on the table beside him. "Marcus, thank God," Richard said, his voice warm with apparent relief. "I heard Ethan's stable. That's wonderful news. I was so worried." "Were you?" Marcus kept his voice flat and motionless. "Worried enough to come to the hospital at midnight? Of course. You're my closest friend. Ethan's like a nephew to me." Richard's performance was flawless. Concern, affection, relief, all visible in his expression. Years of board meetings had taught him how to wear whatever face the situation required. Marcus pulled up Emma's security footage on his tablet, held it where the camera would capture it. "Then you want to explain this." He played the video, watched Richard's face as the footage showed him approaching Ethan's champagne glass, tipping in the vial's contents, walking away. For just a second, maybe half a second, Richard's mask slipped. Marcus saw calculation flash across his features, saw his eyes track through options and outcomes with the speed of someone who'd planned for contingencies. Then the mask returned, but too late. Marcus had spent 20 years reading faces across negotiation tables. He knew guilt when he saw it. "I don't know what you think that shows," Richard said carefully, "but obviously it's been edited or manipulated. How did you reverse the compound effects?" Marcus asked quietly. Richard blinked. "What?" "The compound. The toxin you put in my son's drink. You just asked how I reversed its effects. How did you know there was a compound to reverse?" Silence. Richard's expression went through several micro-changes. Realization of his slip, calculation of whether he could talk his way out, recognition that he couldn't. His face hardened. The friendly concern disappeared, replaced by something cold and pragmatic. "You don't understand what's at stake. Enlighten me." "The Chin Empire is bigger than one family, Marcus. Bigger than your sentimental attachment to legacy and bloodline. Some sacrifices are necessary for the greater good. The greater good being you taking control of my company." Richard smiled, a thin, joyless expression. "The company you've been running into the ground with your outdated values and inefficient sentimentality. Yes, I made changes to the succession bylaws. Changes you signed without reading because you trusted me. Changes that put me in control if your bloodline ends." He leaned forward, speaking directly to the camera. "Your grandfather understood what you don't. That empires are built on hard choices. That sentiment is weakness. That sometimes—" The door to the security office opened off-camera. Richard stopped mid-sentence as his legal team arrived. 3 attorneys in suits that probably cost more than Emma's annual salary. "Mr. Thornton will not be answering any further questions," the lead attorney said crisply. "You're holding him without cause. Release him immediately or face legal action." Marcus watched Richard stand, straighten his tie, his composure completely restored. He smiled at the camera, not the friendly smile of a concerned friend, but the predatory smile of someone who'd played the game and believed he'd win. "Give Ethan my regards," Richard said. Then he walked out, flanked by lawyers, escorted from the hospital by his own security detail before Marcus's team could stop him. Dr. Morrison appeared at Marcus's shoulder. "We recorded everything. The confession, the admission about the bylaws. It won't be enough," Marcus said quietly. "Not against his legal resources. Not without proof of what was in that vial." He turned to Emma. "But we have something he doesn't expect. We have you, and we have your family's documentation. And I have resources to protect you while we build a case that will actually hold." Emma looked terrified. He'll come after me now, after my family. He'll try, Marcus agreed, which is why you're not leaving this hospital until I have a protection plan in place. Dr. Morrison, I need you to document everything medically, every test result, every detail of Ethan's treatment and recovery. Make it ironclad. He looked at his son, sleeping peacefully now. Color returned to his face, chest rising and falling with normal, healthy breaths. Richard thinks he's won because he has lawyers and connections. But he forgot one thing. Marcus's voice hardened with resolve. I didn't build an empire by giving up when people with more resources tried to crush me. And I've never been more motivated than I am right now. 3 days after Ethan's miraculous recovery, Marcus sat in his son's hospital room reviewing quarterly reports on his laptop. Ethan slept peacefully, color fully restored, monitors showing healthy vitals. The worst was over, Marcus thought. He'd been wrong about many things, but at least his son was alive. The courier arrived at 2:47 p.m. with a manila envelope marked legal documents, time-sensitive. Marcus opened it standing by the window. His hand started shaking before he finished the first page. Chun Technologies, Advanced Materials Division, Richard's subsidiary, was filing multiple lawsuits. Reckless endangerment for allowing unlicensed medical treatment. Slander and defamation for baseless conspiracy accusations. Breach of fiduciary duty for mental instability affecting company leadership. Each lawsuit meticulously documented, backed by affidavits from medical experts Marcus had never met, seeking damages in the hundreds of millions. His phone buzzed, news alerts flooding in simultaneously. Richard was on CNBC, sitting in a pristine office, his expression perfectly calibrated to convey concerned professionalism. Marcus Chun is my friend, Richard told the camera with practiced sympathy. But grief can make people irrational. He allowed a superstitious folk remedy to be administered to his dying son, a decision that could have killed the boy. Now, rather than acknowledge the dangerous choice he made, he's making wild accusations to cover his own negligence. Another channel. Richard on CNN. I understand why a desperate father might grasp at anything, but we can't allow emotion to override medical safety protocols. What precedent does this set that anyone with a family recipe can override trained specialists? The medical establishment was splitting. Dr. Harrison from Johns Hopkins issued a statement condemning Marcus's decision as dangerous anti-science sentiment that threatens public health. 3 other prominent physicians signed on, their credentials and institutional affiliations lending weight to the condemnation. By evening, the medical board had opened a formal investigation into Dr. Morrison for allowing unauthorized treatment. The hospital administration released a statement distancing themselves from any violations of medical protocols that may have occurred under emotional duress. TechCorp's board members started calling, not to offer support, to question Marcus's mental fitness to lead. The stock price dropped 12% today. One said carefully, investors are concerned about leadership stability. Marcus watched the numbers. Billions in market capitalization evaporating as confidence eroded. His phone buzzed with messages from allies suddenly too busy to take his calls, from partners requesting temporary pauses on joint ventures, from contacts who'd built careers on his favor now backing away as if failure were contagious. By the 3rd day, his support network had collapsed to 3 people. Dr. Morrison, whose career was now on the line alongside his, Emma, who had nothing to lose because she'd never had institutional power to begin with, and his personal attorney, who kept repeating variations of "This is bad, Marcus. Really bad." Marcus sat in Ethan's room at 3 a.m., watching his son sleep, doubt creeping through his certainty like poison through blood. The world was telling him he'd made a dangerous, negligent choice, that he'd allowed desperation to override judgment, that he'd endangered his son with superstition. Did I make the right choice? He whispered to the darkness. Ethan's eyes opened. His son had been awake, Marcus realized. Listen, Dad. Ethan's voice was stronger now, almost back to normal. I'm alive. That's all that matters. He reached for Marcus's hand. Everyone out there is arguing about protocols and precedents and liability. But I was dying and Emma saved me. That's the only truth that counts. Marcus felt something loosen in his chest. His son, 16 years old and wiser than any board member, had cut through the noise to the essential reality. They're trying to destroy us, Marcus said quietly. Then we fight back, Ethan replied. Not with their weapons, with the truth. Emma's truth, her family's truth, the truth they've been trying to bury for generations. He squeezed Marcus's hand. You taught me that empires are built on decisive action. So decide, Dad. Are we going to let Richard win? Or are we going to make sure everyone knows what he did? Marcus looked at his son and saw Lynn's fierce determination staring back at him. Saw courage that had nothing to do with wealth or power and everything to do with refusing to be silenced. We fight, Marcus said. Emma sat in the small apartment she shared with her parents and younger sister, staring at the letter that had arrived that morning. Official letterhead from Immigration and Customs Enforcement. Her parents, undocumented for 20 years, working jobs no one else wanted, raising 2 daughters who were citizens, were now facing deportation proceedings. The timing wasn't coincidence. Richard's legal team had made that clear in the letter that accompanied the IC notice. Recant your false statements regarding Mr. Thornton, or face consequences for your family's immigration violations. Emma's hands shook as she read it for the 5th time. Her mother sat at the kitchen table, silent tears streaming down her face. Her father stood at the window, shoulders rigid, with the helpless fury of a man who'd spent 2 decades building a life that could be dismantled with a single signature. We should go back to Mexico, her mother whispered, before they take us in handcuffs. No, Emma's younger sister, Sophia, 14 years old and angry in the way only teenagers who've watched their parents suffer can be, stood in the doorway. We're not running. Mija, you don't understand. I understand perfectly, Sophia interrupted. Mama died because rich people hid the truth about the poison in our blood. Now they're trying to hide the truth again. And you want to let them? Her voice cracked. Are you going to let them do it again? Emma felt the words like a physical blow. If I speak up, they'll destroy us. Dad could be deported before the week ends. Mom could. They are already destroying us, Sophia said fiercely. At least this way we fight back. At least this way. Mama asked death means something. Your knowledge means something. The grandmother who wrote down those remedies when everyone told her she was ignorant. She means something. Emma looked at her sister and saw herself at 14, watching their mother bleed to death in a county hospital because they couldn't afford the specialists who might have saved her. Watching knowledge that could have helped dismissed as superstition because it came from poor brown women instead of men with medical degrees. Marcus had offered to pay for everything, lawyers, protection, relocation if needed. I'll handle Richard's threats, he promised. But Emma knew how the world worked. Money helped, but it didn't make you immune. And if Marcus's empire was crumbling under Richard's assault, what protection could he really offer? Her phone buzzed. A text from Marcus. Press conference tomorrow. Your choice if you want to speak. But Emma, once you do this, there's no taking it back. Richard will come at you with everything he has. Emma stared at the message for a long moment. Then she typed, good. The truth shouldn't be taken back. The next morning, Emma stood in the hospital courtyard wearing her catering uniform. She'd pulled it from the closet deliberately. The same stained white shirt and black vest she'd worn the night Ethan collapsed. Visual proof of the class divide everyone wanted to pretend didn't exist. Media cameras surrounded her, more cameras than she'd ever seen outside of television. Her hands trembled as she gripped the podium, but her voice came out steady. My name is Emma Rodriguez. 3 days ago, I saved Ethan Chen's life using a remedy my great-grandmother created, because doctors told her that her family suffering didn't matter enough to investigate. She told the complete story, the historical poisoning, the genetic vulnerability passed through generations, Richard's tampering captured on security footage that she now displayed on screens behind her. She showed her great-grandmother's notes, pages of careful documentation that proved indigenous knowledge wasn't ignorance, just knowledge the powerful chose not to recognize. They want you to think folk knowledge is ignorance, Emma said, her voice gaining strength. But my family preserved a cure that saved a life when modern medicine failed. When 18 specialists gave up, my great-grandmother's wisdom succeeded. Not because it was magic, because it was science the medical establishment refused to see. She held up the leather pouch, now returned to her after being tested and documented. This isn't superstition. It's survival. It's what happens when people who aren't allowed into universities still have to solve problems. When people who aren't given grants still have to save their children. The video went viral within hours. Hashtag #BelieveEmma trended globally. Working-class communities rallied online and in person, recognizing their own dismissal and invisibility in Emma's story. More surprisingly, some doctors came forward supporting her. Dr. Patricia Chen, no relation, from UCLA posted, "Indigenous medical knowledge deserves investigation, not dismissal." Emma Rodriguez's family did epidemiological work that would be praised if it came from an academic institution. We need to examine our biases about whose knowledge counts. The narrative was shifting, slowly but shifting. Emma had made herself a target, but she'd also made herself impossible to ignore. Drop a comment right now. Do you think Emma made the right choice going public? Would you risk everything to expose the truth? Let me know below, and make sure you're subscribed because Richard's about to face justice. Dr. Sarah Morrison had spent 23 years building a reputation as a meticulous hematologist who followed protocols and published in peer-reviewed journals. She'd never risked her career on anything, until now. In her private lab at 2 a.m., working on personal time to avoid hospital oversight, she ran unauthorized analyses on samples from Ethan's treatment. The remedy Emma had administered cross-referenced against Ethan's blood work, tested against every database she could access. The results made her hands shake. The active compound in Emma's remedy, derived from yerba de sangre, bound specifically to an industrial toxin. Not approximately, not generally, specifically, like a key designed for one lock. She ran the test 3 times, certain she'd made an error, but the molecular binding was unmistakable. She pulled up the toxin's chemical signature, searched industrial manufacturing databases, found it, a compound used in high-grade electronics manufacturing, produced by exactly one subsidiary of Chen Technologies, the division Richard Thornton controlled. Dr. Morrison cross-referenced Ethan's blood work from the night of his collapse. The toxin was present at levels consistent with deliberate poisoning, not environmental exposure. Someone had administered a carefully calculated dose designed to trigger the genetic vulnerability without leaving obvious traces. But Emma's remedy neutralized it. The mechanism was elegant. The herb's compounds didn't force clotting or suppress immune response. They simply bound to the toxin molecules and rendered them inert, allowing Ethan's natural systems to recover. This wasn't superstition. It was targeted medicine developed through generations of observation and testing by people who'd never had access to laboratories but had something more valuable: motivation and meticulous documentation. Dr. Morrison accessed the hospital's administrative system. Richard was listed as an emergency contact for Ethan, which gave her legal justification for reviewing his digital footprint in hospital records. What she found made her blood run cold. Emails to a private research laboratory need complete genetic vulnerability analysis for Rodriguez bloodline markers, specifically hereditary responses to industrial compounds. Correspondence with his lawyer. Succession protocols need to account for elimination of direct bloodline. What documentation is required to trigger transfer of control? Purchase orders for the specific toxin compound, quantities far exceeding any legitimate business need, dated 3 weeks before Ethan's collapse. Dr. Morrison compiled everything into a formal report, then made copies, sent one to federal investigators, one to the medical board, one to Marcus's attorneys. and one to the press. Her statement released simultaneously, based on laboratory analysis. Emma Rodriguez's treatment targeted a specific toxin found in Ethan Chen's blood work at levels consistent with deliberate poisoning. This was not superstition. It was targeted medicine developed through rigorous observation and testing. The medical community owes Emma Rodriguez and her family an apology for dismissing their knowledge as primitive when it was actually more sophisticated than our own protocols. Within hours, the NIH announced an investigation into indigenous remedies for toxin exposure. 3 major medical journals requested articles from Dr. Morrison about the case. The narrative in medical circles began to shift from dangerous folk remedy to overlooked traditional knowledge. Richard's response came through his lawyers, denying all accusations, claiming the emails were misinterpreted business correspondence, insisting the security footage was edited, doubling down on his lawsuits against Marcus, Emma, and now Dr. Morrison for defamation. But the evidence was public now, and evidence Dr. Morrison knew from decades of scientific work had a way of speaking louder than lawyers. The tipping point came from an unexpected source. A woman named Patricia Yamamoto posted a video on social media. I watched Emma Rodriguez's press conference and realized my sister died the same way. 17 years ago, she worked for a Chin technology supplier, got into a contract dispute, then suddenly developed a bleeding disorder doctors couldn't explain. Within 24 hours, 2 more families came forward, then 5, then 11. All had business connections to Richard Thornton's branch of operations. All had experienced mysterious bleeding disorders in family members after disputes or competitive conflicts. All had seen specialists who found no explanation. 3 had died. The others had survived through luck or treatments that worked for reasons doctors couldn't articulate. The pattern was unmistakable. 30 years of systematically eliminating business rivals through genetic warfare, so sophisticated it looked like natural causes or medical mysteries. TechCorp's board members began reviewing evidence privately. The emails Dr. Morrison had uncovered, cross-referenced with decades of suspicious deaths, painted a picture no amount of legal maneuvering could explain away. 3 board members broke ranks, releasing a joint statement supporting Marcus and calling for Richard's immediate removal. The stock price rebounded as Marcus's narrative gained credibility. Investors realized the instability wasn't Marcus's grief-driven irrationality. It was Richard's decades of criminal conspiracy coming to light. The district attorney opened a criminal investigation into corporate poisoning. Federal agencies joined. Attempted murder crossed state lines, involved interstate commerce, potentially violated chemical weapons statutes. Richard's lawsuits lost momentum as his own legal jeopardy mounted. Then came the moment that shifted everything from scandal to vindication. Ethan was cleared for hospital discharge. Dr. Morrison scheduled it for 10 a.m. on a Tuesday, notified media in advance. Let them gather in the hospital courtyard with cameras ready. Marcus walked out first, then stepped aside. Ethan emerged next, 16 years old, walking on his own, strong and healthy. No wheelchair, no assistance, no visible weakness. Living proof that Emma's remedy hadn't just kept him alive, but had actually cured him. Emma walked beside Ethan, and Dr. Morrison flanked his other side. Marcus joined them, and the 4 stood together for photographs that would run on every major news outlet. The visual was undeniable. The billionaire CEO, his recovered son, the waitress who'd saved him, and the doctor who'd validated her knowledge. For people from completely different worlds, united by truth against institutional power. A reporter shouted, "Ethan, how do you feel?" Ethan smiled, the easy smile of a teenager who'd faced death and won. "I feel like I got a second chance because someone was brave enough to speak up when everyone told her to stay quiet. That's worth more than anything my family's money could buy." The image went viral within minutes. Not just news, hope. Proof that knowledge from the margins could challenge power at the center and win. We're about to enter the courtroom where everything gets decided. But first, if this story is keeping you on the edge of your seat, smash that like button and hit subscribe so you never miss powerful stories like this one. The federal courthouse felt designed to intimidate. Marble columns, vaulted ceilings, the seal of justice watching from every wall. Marcus had been in countless high-stakes negotiations, but this was different. This wasn't about markets or mergers. This was about whether the system would acknowledge truth or protect power. The hearing room divided cleanly along class lines. On one side, Richard Thornton in a $5,000 Navy suit, flanked by 6 attorneys whose hourly rates could feed families for months. Medical board representatives in professional attire, federal investigators with government badges and bureaucratic authority. On the other side, Marcus in his business suit, looking tired despite the expensive tailoring. Emma in her catering uniform again. She'd made it her armor, a deliberate choice that forced everyone to see exactly who had saved a life when credentialed experts had failed. Dr. Morrison in her white coat, the only medical professional willing to stake her career on a waitress's knowledge. The visual power imbalance was stark. Everyone in the room felt it. Richard's lead attorney opened with practiced precision. Your Honor, this case is straightforward. Marcus Chun, overcome by understandable grief, violated established medical protocols. He allowed an unlicensed individual to administer an untested substance to his critically ill son. That this gamble happened to produce a positive outcome doesn't excuse the reckless endangerment. The argument was technically sound. Rules existed for reasons. Precedent mattered. You couldn't allow emotion to override safety protocols, or medicine descended into chaos, where anyone with a folk remedy could override trained specialists. We sympathize with Mr. Chen's desperation, the attorney continued, his tone conveying professional empathy devoid of actual feeling. But rules exist for patient safety. If we excuse this violation, what's next? Whose untested remedy kills a child next time? The cross-examination of Emma was brutal and methodical. Ms. Rodriguez, what medical qualifications do you possess? None. Emma's voice stayed steady despite her hands gripping the witness box edge. No medical degree? No nursing certification? No formal training whatsoever in pharmacology or treatment protocols? No. So you're a waitress making extraordinary claims about a remedy you learned from. What family stories? The attorney's tone dripped polite skepticism. How do you know this wasn't coincidence? How do you know Ethan wouldn't have recovered anyway? Emma met his eyes. Because I watched my mother die from the same condition 12 years ago. I watched 17 specialists try the same treatments these doctors tried. And I watched her bleed to death despite everything they did. This isn't coincidence. This is knowledge my family paid for in blood across 3 generations. Dr. Morrison took the stand next. She presented laboratory data on screens everyone could see. Molecular analysis of the toxin in Ethan's blood, binding properties of Emma's remedy compound, timeline evidence showing recovery beginning minutes after administration. I've been a hematologist for 20 years, Dr. Morrison said, her professional authority filling the room. I've never seen a recovery like this from conventional treatment. The remedy Ms. Rodriguez administered targeted the specific toxin with precision our protocols couldn't match because we weren't looking for toxin exposure. We were treating a bleeding disorder that didn't exist. Federal investigators presented Richard's emails. The evidence laid bare. Genetic vulnerability testing, succession protocols, Rodriguez, bloodline markers. Purchase orders for industrial toxin in quantities with no legitimate business justification. Security footage from the gala showing Richard tampering with Ethan's drink, enhanced and analyzed by 3 independent forensic specialists. Richard's attorney tried to claim circumstantial evidence, business correspondence taken out of context. But the pattern was undeniable. Richard sat rigid, his expensive suit and composed expression increasingly at odds with the mountain of evidence burying him. Then Richard cracked. Under the fourth hour of questioning about the emails, his composure finally shattered. The boy wasn't supposed to survive long enough for some waitress to interfere. The courtroom went silent. Richard's attorneys erupted, trying to retract the statement, claiming stress and confusion. But it was on record, witnessed by dozens, unmistakable in its confession. The judge called for a 10-minute recess. Richard was escorted out, his lawyers surrounding him in damage control formation. Emma sat trembling in her seat. Marcus gripped her hand, afraid if he let go she might disappear. When court resumed, Ethan took the stand. 16 years old in a press shirt, looking younger than his age but speaking with startling clarity. "Do you believe Emma Rodriguez saved your life?" the judge asked directly. Ethan didn't hesitate. "I don't believe it. I know it. I'm alive because she was brave enough to speak up when experts had given up, when everyone told her she was nobody, that her knowledge didn't matter. She spoke anyway. That's not superstition. That's courage." The judge requested a current medical assessment. A doctor testified. Complete recovery. No ongoing bleeding disorder. Toxin levels undetectable. By every measurable metric, Ethan Chun is a healthy 16-year-old boy. "Walk across the room," the judge instructed Ethan. Ethan stood, walked from the witness stand to the judge's bench and back. Steady, strong, alive. Emma cried quietly in the witness section, Marcus's hand still gripping hers. The judge's ruling came after 20 minutes of deliberation. "This case presents extraordinary circumstances. Mr. Chen technically violated protocols. However, the medical system comprehensively failed his son first. Richard Thornton's criminal charges, attempted murder, corporate malfeasance, conspiracy, are forwarded for prosecution. Emma Rodriguez faces no charges. Emergency circumstances and life-saving outcomes warrant exception. Dr. Morrison receives formal reprimand, but no license suspension, and recognition for scientific validation that advanced medical understanding. Mr. Chan is censured for protocol violation, but acknowledged as acting under impossible duress." The judge looked directly at Richard's legal team. "Rules exist to protect patients, not to protect corporations from accountability. This court finds overwhelming evidence of deliberate poisoning. Justice will proceed accordingly." Richard was led away by federal marshals. Emma collapsed into Marcus's arms, sobbing with relief. Ethan joined them, and the three stood together while cameras captured the moment power finally bent to truth. 6 weeks after the federal hearing, Emma's phone rang at 11 p.m. A Texas area code she didn't recognize. "Emma Rodriguez?" The woman's voice cracked with desperation. "My name is Maria Gutierrez. Your mother's cousin Carmen was my aunt. I saw your story on the news, and my daughter." A sob cut through the words. "She's 12 years old, and she's bleeding to death. The doctors can't stop it. They've tried everything. 18 hours of treatments, and nothing's working." Emma felt ice spread through her chest. "What are her symptoms?" Maria described them. Blood seeping from every puncture site, platelets attacking clotting factors. Specialists baffled by the mechanism. The same pattern. The same genetic curse triggered by the same poison. "Can you help her? Please, I don't know who else to." "I'll be there tomorrow," Emma said, then immediately called Marcus and Dr. Morrison in a three-way conference. What if it only worked once? Emma's hands shook, holding the phone. What if Ethan was a fluke, and I try this again and the girl dies, and it's my fault? Emma. Dr. Morrison's voice carried professional certainty. "We have the compound analyzed now. We understand the mechanism at the molecular level. This isn't superstition anymore. It's documented medicine. but we need to replicate it to prove that. Marcus's voice came next. I'll handle all legal liability. I'll have lawyers draft protection documents before you board the plane. Just try. That little girl deserves the same chance you gave Ethan. They flew to San Antonio the next morning, Emma, Dr. Morrison, and a medical kit containing the remedy prepared under laboratory conditions. The girl, Isabella Gutierrez, lay in pediatric ICU surrounded by the same defeated specialists, the same useless machines, the same atmosphere of death approaching despite expertise. Emma's hands trembled as she prepared the mixture. Dr. Morrison supervised, documenting every step for medical records and legal protection. The herbs steeped in sterile water, the amber extract added in precise measured drops. Everything done under medical supervision now. But following the recipe Emma's great-grandmother had perfected through generations of trial and observation. They administered it through Isabella's foreport, the same copper-colored liquid disappearing into a dying child's veins. Maria Gutierrez gripped her daughter's hand, praying in Spanish under her breath. Emma counted seconds. 30, 60, 90. Then the same miracle. Bleeding slowing at surgical sites. Color returning to lips that had gone gray. Monitors stabilizing from erratic chaos to normal rhythms. Within 5 minutes, Isabella's eyes opened. Within an hour, she was asking for water. Within 4 hours, doctors were documenting complete recovery with the stunned expressions of people watching science rewrite itself in real time. Maria collapsed into Emma's arms, sobbing gratitude in English and Spanish mixed together. Emma cried too, but these tears were different from the ones she'd shed with Ethan. These were tears of validation. This isn't one miracle. It's replicable medicine. Dr. Morrison stood with her tablet, documenting everything with the methodical precision of a scientist recognizing paradigm shift. This needs to be studied, documented, shared. Emma, your family's knowledge isn't just a remedy. It's a protocol. We can teach this, refine it, make it available to everyone who needs it. Emma looked at Isabella, alive, recovering, saved by knowledge passed down from a great-grandmother who couldn't read medical journals but could read the language written in plants and blood and survival. The knowledge worked, not once, twice, which meant it could work again, and again, and again. 3 months later, the cases multiplied through networks of family and desperation. Patient number 3, a young man in Los Angeles, distant Rodriguez cousin, collapsed at work with the same bleeding pattern. Emma and Dr. Morrison arrived within hours. Same remedy, same recovery. Patients #4-8. More distant relatives across the Southwest, Arizona, New Mexico, Nevada, Texas. Each call came from families who'd seen Emma's story, recognized their own suffering in her description. Each treatment produced the same miraculous stabilization. Then came patient number 9, a woman in Oregon with no Rodriguez family connection. But genetic testing revealed she carried the same markers, inherited through a different ancestral line. The remedy worked anyway. The toxin vulnerability wasn't unique to one family. It was scattered across populations with specific genetic profiles. By patient number 15, the pattern was undeniable. Emma's remedy worked on anyone with genetic vulnerability to this class of industrial toxins. The family knowledge had universal application. Media coverage evolved from sensational headlines, "Miracle Waitress saves another life," to serious medical journalism. The New England Journal of Medicine requested a case study. PBS sent a documentary crew to follow Emma and Dr. Morrison's work. Academic conferences invited presentations. Some medical establishment resistance remained. Physicians uncomfortable with the precedent of traditional knowledge superseding formal training. But the resistance softened as evidence mounted. Hard to argue with 15 recoveries when conventional medicine had 15 failures. Emma's life transformed completely. She'd quit waitressing after the second patient, working full-time with Dr. Morrison to document cases and refine protocols. The leather pouch now lived in a temperature-controlled museum case. But Emma carried a medical kit with laboratory-prepared versions of her great-grandmother's remedy. She was uncomfortable with attention still. Interviews felt awkward, speaking engagements terrifying. But she was growing into the advocate role. In a 60 Minutes interview that reached 20 million viewers, she said, "I'm not a doctor, but my family's survival depended on remembering what doctors didn't know. Both kinds of knowledge matter. The mistake isn't that my grandmother lacked a medical degree. The mistake is that the medical establishment refused to listen to her." Meanwhile, Richard Thornton's empire crumbled. The trial lasted 6 weeks. Evidence overwhelming. Defense crumbling under documentation of decades of systematic poisoning. The jury deliberated for 3 hours before returning guilty verdicts on attempted murder, corporate espionage, and conspiracy charges. 15-year prison sentence. Every asset seized. Chun Technologies completely severed from his control. Reorganized under independent leadership committed to transparency and ethical manufacturing. More importantly, other victims came forward. Historical poisoning cases reopened, patterns recognized, civil suits filed. Families who'd lost members to mysterious bleeding disorders over 3 decades finally had answers and legal recourse. The settlements ran into hundreds of millions. Emma watched the news coverage of Richard being led away in handcuffs, feeling none of the satisfaction she'd expected, just exhaustion and relief that he could poison no one else. "My mother died believing our family was cursed," Emma told Marcus during dinner at the foundation office. "She thought God was punishing us for some sin she couldn't identify. It destroyed her spiritually before it destroyed her physically. Now these families know they weren't cursed. They were targeted. That knowledge matters almost as much as the cure." Marcus nodded. His relationship with Emma transformed from grateful employer to something closer to family. 47 people alive who shouldn't be, he said quietly. Because you refused to stay silent. Because you valued your grandmother's wisdom more than society's dismissal. Ethan, now 17 and thriving, raised his water glass. To Emma's grandmother. To knowledge that survives because someone cares enough to remember. They toasted with water instead of champagne. None of them touched alcohol anymore. The irony of Ethan's poisoning happening through a champagne glass wasn't lost on anyone. 47 lives saved. The number kept growing. And with each new case, Emma's great-grandmother's knowledge proved itself not as superstition, but as science the medical establishment had been too arrogant to recognize. Marcus approached Emma and Dr. Morrison with his proposal 8 months after Ethan's recovery. They sat in a conference room at TechCorp headquarters. Emma's still uncomfortable in these spaces of power and wealth, but no longer invisible. "I want to fund a proper research lab," Marcus said, sliding a folder across the table. "State-of-the-art facility, full research team, clinical trials to get your remedy through FDA approval so it's legally available everywhere. Partnerships with universities to study traditional medicine systematically." He paused. $50 million initial funding. More is needed. Emma stared at the number written on the proposal document. More money than her family would earn across 10 generations of working-class labor. "I don't know how to run a lab," she said quietly. "I barely graduated high school. I don't speak the language of grant applications and research protocols, and which is why this needs to be a partnership," Dr. Morrison interjected. She'd clearly discussed this with Marcus beforehand. "A foundation, not a for-profit corporation. You serve as co-director alongside me. Equal authority, your knowledge, and my credentials working together instead of in opposition." Emma felt panic rising. What if this turns into another corporation profiting from indigenous knowledge? What if pharmaceutical companies take my grandmother's remedy, patent it. Charge prices poor families can't afford. That's why we structure it as a nonprofit, Marcus said firmly. Any revenue from treatments developed through the foundation goes back into indigenous medical research. Traditional knowledge holders maintain intellectual property rights. We're not extracting value from your family's wisdom. We're amplifying it while keeping control in your hands. The door opened. Ethan entered. 17 now, healthy and strong. Every inch the young man his mother would have been proud of. He'd been listening outside. Emma realized. I'm going pre-med, Ethan announced without preamble. Focus on toxicology and emergency medicine. I want to understand what almost killed me, and I want to make sure it doesn't happen to anyone else. He looked at Emma directly. Will you teach me about your grandmother's other remedies? Not just the bleeding cure, all of it, the knowledge she preserved. Emma felt tears welling. Your mother would be proud of the man you're becoming. She would be proud of you, Ethan countered. You saved her son when her husband's money and power couldn't. That legacy matters more than anything our family built before you entered our lives. Marcus stood, moved to the window overlooking the city his empire had helped shape. I spent my life believing money and power solved everything. Built an empire on that certainty. But a waitress with a leather pouch solved what my billions couldn't. He turned back to face them. I'm establishing this foundation in Lynn's name, the Lynchian Foundation for Indigenous Medical Knowledge. And I'm reaching out to every branch of the Rodriguez family I can find, offering reparations for the historical poisoning my grandfather inflicted on yours. Emma looked at the proposal of the faces around the table. Marcus trying to atone for generational sins. Dr. Morrison risking career credibility to validate marginalized knowledge. Ethan choosing medicine to honor the woman who'd saved him. Okay, she said quietly, but we do this right. We preserve the knowledge exactly as it was passed down, even while we study it scientifically. We don't erase my great-grandmother's voice just because we're adding medical terminology to explain why her observations were correct. We do it right, Marcus agreed, or we don't do it at all. The Rodriguez Foundation's one-year anniversary celebration filled a hotel ballroom with people who shouldn't be alive. 47 patients, all saved by Emma's family remedy, gathered with their families. Children who'd been dying now ran through the event space with the boundless energy of the young and healthy. Adults who'd faced death hugged each other with the fierce gratitude of survivors. Medical professionals who'd supported them, Dr. Morrison, 3 other physicians who'd broken ranks to validate traditional knowledge, were honored with awards they accepted humbly. Media covered it not as scandal but as triumph. The story had shifted from controversy to inspiration, from dangerous folk remedy to groundbreaking integration of traditional and modern medicine. The foundation's new facility occupied a renovated warehouse downtown, deliberate choice to locate in a working-class neighborhood rather than an affluent research campus. Inside, state-of-the-art laboratories where 15 scientists worked alongside traditional healers documenting remedies. Partnerships with 3 universities studying compounds Emma's family had preserved. Clinical trials underway for FDA approval of the refined treatment. One entire floor housed the traditional healing library, a climate-controlled archive preserving indigenous medical knowledge from 50 communities across the Americas. Emma's great-grandmother's notes occupied the place of honor, displayed like the Gutenberg Bible, recognized finally as the scientific documentation they'd always been. Dr. Morrison spoke first. Medicine advances when we listen to all sources of knowledge, not just peer-reviewed journals. Emma Rodriguez's family did epidemiological work that would be celebrated if it came from an academic institution. We owe them and hundreds of other traditional knowledge holders apologies for our arrogance and gratitude for their persistence. Marcus took the podium next, visibly emotional. My son is alive because I listened to someone society told me to ignore. That's a lesson worth more than my entire empire. This foundation exists to make sure no one else has to choose between credentialed expertise and survival wisdom, because the best medicine integrates both. Ethan spoke briefly. I'm one of the lucky ones. Emma spoke up for me. Now we need to speak up for everyone else suffering from industrial toxins, environmental poisoning, and medical conditions that conventional medicine hasn't solved because it refuses to listen to alternative knowledge sources. Finally, reluctantly, Emma approached the podium. The leather pouch sat beside her in its museum case. No longer functional medicine, but powerful symbol. My great-grandmother carried this, Emma said, voice shaking slightly despite months of practice at public speaking. Then my grandmother. Then my mother. Each of them saved lives with what's inside. Now we're making sure it can save more. She announced the milestone achievements. NIH funding approved $15 million for a multi-year study of traditional remedies for toxin exposure. Partnerships with indigenous communities across the Americas documenting over 200 traditional remedies. 4 peer-reviewed papers published in major medical journals, with Emma listed as co-author despite lacking formal credentials. The numbers told the story. 47 lives saved directly. 12 research projects launched studying traditional compounds. Foundation employing 50 people, half from the communities whose knowledge they studied. Scholarship fund established, sending indigenous students to medical and scientific programs, ensuring the next generation could speak both languages, traditional and academic. Then came the surprise moment. Emma's younger sister, Sophia, 14 when Ethan collapsed, now 18, took the podium. I've been accepted to MIT's biomedical engineering program, Sophia announced, her voice clear and strong. Funded by the Foundation Scholarship. My sister saved lives with our grandmother's knowledge. I'm going to learn the science behind why it works. Both kinds of knowing matter. Emma cried openly, pulling her sister into an embrace. Their mother had died, believing her family's knowledge was worthless superstition. Now that knowledge was funding her daughter's education at one of the world's premier scientific institutions. The cycle was breaking. Knowledge flowing both directions. Traditional wisdom informing scientific research. Scientific validation amplifying traditional knowledge. Neither erasing the other. Both stronger together. 47 people applauded. Alive because someone remembered, someone spoke up, someone refused to let ancient wisdom die, just because modern institutions dismissed it. 18 months after the night that changed everything, the St. Regency Hotel hosted another charity gala. But this time, the cause was the Rodriguez Foundation for Indigenous Medical Research. And this time, Emma Rodriguez arrived through the front entrance as an honored guest, not through the service door as invisible labor. She wore a simple dress, elegant but not expensive, professional but not pretentious. She'd never be comfortable in luxury, but she'd learned to navigate these spaces without disappearing into them. The grand ballroom looked identical. Crystal chandeliers, marble floors, vaulted ceilings that made voices echo. Emma stood at the entrance, memories crashing over her like waves. 18 months ago, she'd served champagne to people who looked through her, watched Ethan collapse while holding a tray of hors d'oeuvres, felt terror at speaking up, certain she'd be dismissed or worse. Made the choice to risk everything because staying silent felt like betraying every generation of women who'd kept knowledge alive against institutional erasure. Marcus approached wearing the same tuxedo from that night. Intentional choice, Emma recognized. Beside him, Ethan, no longer pale and dying, but healthy, strong, thriving with the particular vitality of someone who'd faced death and won. The three of them walked together to the spot where Ethan had collapsed. No words at first, just standing where blood had pooled on marble that now reflected chandeliers instead of crisis. Emma knelt, touched the floor with one hand. The marble was cold and smooth, cleaned of all evidence that a 16-year-old had nearly bled to death here. "Thank you, grandmother," she whispered, too quiet for the gala noise to drown out, "for making me brave enough." Marcus offered his hand, helped her stand, the gesture of an equal, not a billionaire assisting someone beneath his class. Ethan embraced her, holding on longer than social convention required. "You gave me my life," Ethan said, voice thick with emotion. "How do I ever repay that?" Emma smiled through tears. "By living it fully. That's all any of us can do." "This place used to represent the moment I was most terrified," Emma said, looking around the ballroom. "Now it represents the moment I found my purpose. Not just saving you, validating generations of silenced knowledge, proving that wisdom doesn't require credentials, just courage." The gala attendees were different tonight. Still some wealthy donors in expensive suits, but also working-class families dressed in their Sunday best, patients Emma had saved, traditional healers from communities partnering with the foundation, scientists who'd learned to listen to knowledge outside peer-reviewed journals. Class barriers dissolved through shared purpose. Billionaires and waitresses, physicians and folk healers, all gathered because truth had proven stronger than institutional gatekeeping. Emma took the microphone for her speech, brief and humble as always. "My great-grandmother couldn't read or write," Emma said, her voice carrying through the ballroom that had once rendered her invisible. "But she could read plants, read bodies, read the signs that doctors with decades of training missed because they weren't looking in the right places. She passed that knowledge to her daughter, who passed it to my mother, who passed it to me. Knowledge doesn't die as long as someone remembers. Tonight, we're making sure the world remembers, not just my family's remedy, but the thousands of other remedies preserved by people society told weren't worth listening to." The applause felt different from anything Emma had experienced. Not polite social obligation, but genuine recognition. She saw it in faces, people understanding that knowledge comes from unexpected places, that survival teaches what universities sometimes can't, that the margins often preserve what the center loses. After the speech, Emma stood with Marcus and Ethan, greeting guests. A young woman approached, Latina, early 20s, wearing a waitress uniform from the hotel catering staff. "I saw what you did," the young woman said shyly. "You were serving drinks, and you saved someone's life. I'm studying nursing at community college at night, working here during the day. People keep telling me I should just focus on work, that education isn't for people like us. But you showed that our knowledge matters too." Emma gripped the young woman's hand. "It matters. You matter. Don't let anyone convince you otherwise." The young woman walked away encouraged. Emma watched her go, thinking about cycles breaking, about knowledge flowing upward from margins to center, about wisdom that had always existed finally receiving recognition. The ballroom glittered with light and possibility. Emma had walked into this space invisible. She was leaving it transformed, not just herself, but the systems that had tried to silence her. That night, Emma fell asleep in a hotel room that cost more than her childhood apartment's monthly rent, a gift for Marcus, who'd insisted she not drive home exhausted. The dream began in her great-grandmother's kitchen in Oaxaca, Mexico. Emma had never been there in life. Her great-grandmother died before Emma was born, but memory lived in stories her mother had told, in photographs faded to sepia, in knowledge passed down like genetic code. Abuela sat at a wooden table worn smooth by generations of use, herbs laid out in careful rows, being sorted and bundled. She looked up as Emma entered, and her face, weathered by sun and hardship, beautiful in the way of women who survived what should have broken them, broke into a smile. "Mija," Abuela said in Spanish that Emma understood perfectly despite never having spoken fluently. "You kept the knowledge alive." Emma sank into the chair across from her. "I was so scared I'd get it wrong." "But you didn't." Abuela's hands continued working, bundling herbs with practiced efficiency. And even if you had, you tried. That's what matters. You spoke when the world told you to be silent. She held up the leather pouch, not in a museum case, but worn and functional, still carrying medicine. This carried our family's hope for generations. Now it carries the world's hope. Abuela stood, moved around the table, touched Emma's face with hands that smelled of earth and herbs and healing. You did what I could not. You made them listen. Made them understand that our knowledge wasn't ignorance wearing different clothes. You gave voice to all of us they silenced. Tears streamed down Emma's face. Mama would be proud. Your mother is proud. I am proud. Abuela smiled, and the kitchen began filling with light, warm and golden and peaceful. Live, Mija. Live fully, as you told that boy to do. You've honored the past. Now honor the future. The light grew brighter, and Abuela's form dissolved into it like morning mist under sun. Emma woke with tears of peace, not grief. The hotel room was dark and quiet, but she felt something she hadn't felt since childhood. Complete. Her great-grandmother's work was honored. Her mother's suffering given meaning. The knowledge secured for generations to come. Legacy complete. Purpose fulfilled. And life, her own life, finally ready to be fully lived. Emma Rodriguez Santos stood in her office at the Rodriguez Chin Foundation, 5 years after the night in St. Regency's Grand Ballroom that changed everything. The office overlooked the street where she'd grown up. Deliberate choice, keeping the foundation rooted in the community it served. Behind her desk, the leather pouch sat on loan from the Smithsonian National Museum of American History, where it now lived permanently as an artifact of medical significance. On the opposite wall, photographs of all 300 patients saved by her great-grandmother's remedy over 5 years. 300 faces, children, teenagers, adults, alive because someone listened. At 29, Emma was co-director of a foundation with $40 million in annual operating budget, nationally recognized advocate for traditional healing knowledge, and published author. My grandmother's pharmacy had spent 18 weeks on the New York Times bestseller list, translated into 12 languages, taught in medical schools as required reading about integrating diverse knowledge systems. She spoke regularly at universities, medical conferences, government hearings. Still uncomfortable with fame, but she'd learned to wield the platform effectively. Last month, she testified before Congress about protecting indigenous intellectual property rights, speaking truth to power with the authority of someone whose knowledge had proven itself through 300 lives saved. Her hand rested on her pregnant belly, 7 months along, carrying the next generation who would learn both worlds. Traditional remedies passed down orally and scientific validation published in peer-reviewed journals. Knowledge without hierarchies of value, just different languages describing the same truths. Dr. Sarah Morrison was now Chief Medical Officer of the Foundation and MacArthur Genius Grant recipient for her work bridging indigenous knowledge and modern science. She'd published 47 peer-reviewed papers, changed medical school curricula at 15 universities, and mentored 24 PhD students studying traditional medicine compounds. Still practicing hematology, still learning, still advocating for listening to voices the establishment traditionally ignored. Marcus Chun had stepped back from TechCorp's CEO role, dedicating himself primarily to foundation work. His relationship with Ethan had transformed completely. They had dinner twice weekly, traveled together, talked openly about feelings and fears in ways Marcus had never managed during Ethan's childhood. He'd established a $500 million reparations fund for families historically harmed by corporate poisoning, personally reaching out to every victim he could locate. I almost lost everything before I understood what everything actually meant, Marcus said in a recent Forbes interview. My son, purpose beyond profit, understanding that wisdom comes from unexpected places if we're humble enough to listen. Ethan was 22, third-year medical student, specializing in toxicology and emergency medicine. He volunteered 20 hours weekly at a free clinic serving undocumented communities, patients who couldn't afford specialists, who needed doctors willing to listen to folk remedies their abuelitas recommended. He was writing his dissertation on genetic vulnerabilities to environmental toxins, carrying a photo from his hospital discharge day in his wallet. Marcus, Emma, Dr. Morrison, and himself standing together. Proof that survival sometimes requires revolution. He was dating Sofia Rodriguez, Emma's younger sister, now a biomedical engineer at the foundation, designing equipment that could test traditional remedy compounds in field conditions anywhere in the world. Both kinds of knowing, working together. The foundation's impact had grown exponentially. 300 lives saved directly. 2,000 traditional remedies documented from 50 indigenous communities across 3 continents. 15 compounds in clinical trials. 8 FDA-approved treatments derived from traditional knowledge, with profits flowing back to the communities who preserve them. $200 million in annual research funding. Partnerships with 40 universities worldwide. Scholarship programs that had sent 500 indigenous students to medical and scientific programs, ensuring the next generation could speak both languages without having to choose. The institutional change was even more significant. Medical schools now required coursework in traditional healing systems. The NIH established permanent funding for indigenous medical research, $50 million annually. 3 major pharmaceutical companies reformed their profit-sharing models, recognizing traditional knowledge holders' intellectual property rights. Legal precedents established that preserved traditional knowledge deserved the same protection as patented corporate innovations. Emma's phone rang, a number from Lagos, Nigeria. Ms. Rodriguez? My name is Dr. Adeyemi. I'm calling about a family here with a genetic condition causing mysterious bleeding. Modern treatments aren't working, but there's a traditional healer in the village who claims her grandmother knew how to treat it. The medical establishment is dismissing her, but I remembered your story. I wondered. Emma smiled. I'm on the next flight, and I'm bringing Dr. Morrison. We'll listen to what the healer knows, test it scientifically. And if it works, we'll make sure the world knows her name and her knowledge saves lives. The cycle continued. Listening, validating, integrating, saving lives. Refusing to let knowledge die just because it came from mouths society preferred to silence. After hanging up, Emma looked at the wall of photographs. 300 faces representing 300 families, each with their own stories of marginalized knowledge, finally receiving validation. Her hand touched her pregnant belly again. Your great-great-grandmother's wisdom will reach you too, little one, she whispered. But you'll grow up in a world that respects it. That's the gift we're giving you. A future where knowledge doesn't need permission from institutions to be recognized as valid. Her computer displayed the closing slides from her TED Talk last month. 20 million views and counting. They asked me if I regret not having medical credentials. I don't, because my credential was surviving. My credential was remembering. My credential was having the courage to speak when everyone told me to stay silent. That's the credential that saves lives, not the degree on your wall, but the conviction in your heart that knowledge comes from many sources, and every source deserves to be heard. The foundation's logo filled the screen as the talk ended. Rodriguez Foundation for Indigenous Medical Knowledge, honoring the wisdom that never needed permission to heal. Emma packed her medical kit for Nigeria. Another call, another life to save, another healer whose knowledge deserved amplification instead of dismissal. The work continued. The knowledge lived. And 300 photographs on her office wall proved that revolution sometimes begins with a waitress clutching a leather pouch, choosing to speak when the world demands silence. Emma's courage to speak up when everyone told her to stay silent saved 300 lives. If this story moved you, inspired you, or made you think differently about whose knowledge matters, hit that subscribe button and share this video with someone who needs to hear it.